All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Today we want to focus on the Dutch Republic. So the Dutch Republic is the only republic of its time, and it's a neat point to look at as a point of comparison with England, because England at the time and the Dutch Republic both set up, a parliamentary system where we're, in the case of England, limiting the power of a monarch, and the Dutch Republic has no monarch at all. And the two are both trading powers. Their histories are similar and entwined. And so it's an interesting case study to look at the Dutch Republic and why it is that and how it is that they're able to resist absolutism for a fairly decent amount of time. By the 18th century, it will cease to be a republic, but we'll still have a lot of economic interests. So given the very different route of Prussia or Austria, Russia, Sweden, France, which all have centralization of absolute rule, it's sort of important to ask the question of, well, why do you see such a different outcome in England and the Netherlands, right? What's the ultimate outcome that changes? And so we'll use the Dutch Republic, and I'll refer a little bit to England. In class, we're going to focus a bit more on England, but what I want you to do today is really be able to identify how the Dutch, some of the key features of the Dutch Republic, how they were able to maintain a republic, and then what are some of the achievements. So just take notes for this podcast. There won't be any specific question. All right, so let's get started. So one of the first characteristics that helps launch the Netherlands and make it into a Dutch republic is the middle class. It's not a coincidence that in both England and the Dutch Republic, you have the largest percentage of middle-class population that you could find in Europe. These two regions, along with the city-states in northern Italy, have the greatest middle-class populations, and they are going to be living in the cities. The middle class is extremely small in a country like Prussia. Prussia is not going to include the Hanseatic League cities, and so you'll have in the Netherlands and in England an astonishingly large middle class. Moreover, in the case of a place like England, there's a tremendous amount of fluidity between elites. So you have intermarriage between nobles and of wealthy, almost to the point where they're buying themselves titles. You won't see that same kind of relationship in the Dutch, but it's important to recognize in England there's a lot of fluidity between your nobles in the groups. Cities are where the middle class will be living. And the bourgeois and the burghers are the urban residents who are losing their privileges on the continent to big-time absolutist states. And so they will defend, really vociferously, their privileges as town people against absolute pretensions of nobles. And so in the case of the Netherlands, we're going to see a really active middle-class elite that are going to be pushing for remaining staunchly independent of their of any kind of absolutist rule. With that in mind, we have a really strong anti-absolutist mindset in a place like the Netherlands. The origins of the Netherlands comes from civil war or a war of independence against the Spanish absolutist state, right? Against Philip II and against the Habsburg rule. This Civil War is beginning in 1572 with the Reformation, but it's going to go straight through the 30 Years' War, culminating with the Peace of Westphalia. In reality, the Netherlands were pretty free of Spanish rule well before the Peace of Westphalia, but it's not formally recognized in international treaty until the Treaty of Westphalia. So the Dutch can imagine, for them, the scariest thing, the scariest outcome would be that an army is sent by the King of Spain to take more taxes from them of the Spanish provinces, and try and force them to convert to Catholicism. Most of the Dutch population at this point is Calvinist, and so the fear of this absolutist reach is going to be a major fear. Those people who believe in the Dutch Republic, which was the vast majority of the people, just as the majority of the population of England held to the rights of Parliament, they have this scary scenario of their rights being violated, trampled upon, dominated, eliminated, eradicated by big-time absolutist rulers. The other scary thing, so they're afraid of Spain and the Habsburgs, but the other scary thing for them is, of course, France. I mean, it's this big power that's neighboring them down right below. And Louis XIV would love to have his hands on the Netherlands. The Netherlands, we'll go into this in a little bit, is such an economic powerhouse that any group would love it, and particularly a person like Louis XIV who looks to extend his power and control as well as extend Catholicism, and this could be an easy target. And the Netherlands, the Dutch are so aware of this fear, they're willing to do whatever it takes, including they literally open dikes which hold back the water to help create cleared land. They opened the dikes and flooded the French armies back. They created these floods, destroying their own area of land in order to block away the French advancing troops. Rejecting the rule of a monarch, the Dutch also established, after they are rejecting the rule of Spain and the Habsburg rule, the Dutch are going to be establishing a republic where the power is resting in the hands of the people and is exercised through elected representatives. Among the Dutch, they set up an oligarchy of wealthy businessmen, and each of these businessmen that are members of this oligarchy are going to be called regents. And they're going to be handling the affairs of their local province. So if you take a look here, the Netherlands, as we call it, Holland is just one province of the Netherlands. It's almost as if it's like a United States. Each one is its own state, and each of those has its own assembly or a state that is headed by a regent. And then the provincial estates virtually held all of the power. So each of these estates really has all of the local power. There is a federal assembly or a states general that will handle foreign affairs and war, but it doesn't really possess any true authority. All issues then always had to be referred back to the provinces. So the provinces are where the heart of the power is, and you had to go back to those local estates for any kind of approval, as the federal power had to always go back to the local estates. Holland was a province with a very large navy and the most wealth, so they would normally dominate the republic and the states general. In each province, the estates, that assembly, appointed one executive officer, known as the stadholder, Stadholder, the stadholder, who's going to be carrying out a lot of the ceremonial functions for that state. It's going to be responsible for military defense. They were freely chosen in theory by the assembly, but often in practice, the House of Orange, which was a noble presence in the Netherlands, usually will hold the office of the stadholder in several of the provinces. This always sort of led to like this tension between the House of Orange and the Republican estates, who were very suspicious that the House of Orange wanted to eventually become king of the Netherlands and end the Republic. One of the members of the House of Orange is William III. William III is the man who marries Queen Mary, or Mary, the daughter of James II, who will then become the Queen of England with William and Mary in the Glorious Revolution. So after that point, the Netherlands actually continues to exist and continue to have a republic without any stadholders for a few years. So you can sort of see this tension is there. They wanted to have this as a presence, but it's not fully present. So stadholder is that executive officer in each of the provinces, and it's often held by those princes. So we do see a little bit of a religious presence in England. I mean, in the Netherlands. Another key characteristic of the Netherlands, of the Dutch Republic, is religious toleration. In 1632, the Dutch adopted religious toleration, which included Calvinists, Catholics, Mennonites, and Jews, to be able to practice their religion as they saw fit. Now, with that in mind, Jews did have limited rights, and we will see some examples of anti-Semitism in the Netherlands and the Dutch, as you do see throughout all of Europe. But for the most part, it is a major safe haven for any religion, any background to be able to practice. So how did the Dutch become so wealthy? Right? I keep referring to that they just have such enormous wealth. And what you have here in front of you is an image of Amsterdam. And the blue in this image of the map of Amsterdam, those are all canals. And I've never been to Amsterdam. I'd love to go see it. It looks like it must be a beautiful city to have these canals running through it. But the canals and the city of Amsterdam, that is your clue for its source of wealth. The canals were used to transport goods. The city structure itself is grounded in economic trade, right? Global trade. It's participating in trade. The entire city, the way it was built, the houses along the canals, and the transports of it were going to be really global trade as their focus. At this time, the Dutch, before the emergence of it as a global trading power, they have these long, flat boats, herring ships. And these ships, they were originally just herring fishing ships. And they were able to go all up into up into the Newfoundland in the 17th century in Iceland, and they would then be able to go freezing off the coast of Iceland. With these long, narrow boats, they were able to dominate the Baltic trade, and herring is an important part of that because herring is going to be able to keep once it's salted. Now the Dutch will use that shipping business, their skills of building the ships, then to from their herring fishing into creating a very low shipping rate. They became excellent shipbuilders. And they're going to be able to offer a very low shipping rate, the lowest in all of Europe, and they also had the largest merchant marine force in all of Europe, which allowed them to undersell all foreign competitors. So a nation like Spain or in England or France might use a company from those countries might use the Dutch for shipping rather than their own nation. In the 1630s, there are 2,500 trading ships. They are going to become the principal supplier of grain and fish in Europe. The Dutch will dominate Baltic trade. They're going to reach the East Indies in the 1620s and 1630s. They're going to be bringing back cinnamon, nutmeg, all sorts of valuables. It's this wealth that allows them to fight the long, hard war of independence against Spain, and it's what helps them win. They also are the only country, they have exclusive trading rights with Japan. Out of all the European powers, they're the ones who are able to have that exclusive rights. The Netherlands itself, just to keep in mind, is an extraordinarily small country. And it's the most populated country in Europe then as well as now, per square kilometer. So one of the challenges they're going to have to figure out is, well, how do I feed this nation? How do we supply them? And in order to feed the ever-increasing population, they also are ever-increasing the amount of land they have. So another feature for the economic boom in the Netherlands is that they were able to create a steady food supply thanks to new agricultural technologies that they develop. And so the Dutch and the English, it's no coincidence that those are also the first two powers to go through the agricultural revolution. The Dutch managed to actually create new land. And if you look on the map there, the different shades are different land reclamation that they're able to acquire. So there's new land that is built and they reclaim more land. The Dutch managed to reclaim 36,000 acres of land just from the sea between 1590 and 1615 to extend their farmland. And so this is going to lead to commercialized agriculture, where they're going to be growing agricultural goods in mass and then selling it in markets, making the focus more of the city life rather than the farm life. Even the farm life is industrialized in some way. All of this, from the farming to the shipping, is going to lead to a major economic boom in the Netherlands, and the Dutch through that are going to be developing a highly sophisticated banking system. Because a lot of ships tend to go down or are taken by pirates. There's so many threats to your shipping goods. People started to look for some kind of way to protect their goods and their investment. And so the very first insurance companies are also going to be coming out of the Dutch Netherlands. And so people would be looking for some kind of way to get the value back. And so banks like the Bank of Amsterdam will get their start in order to regulate this the insurance companies and to be able to protect their goods. The Bank of Amsterdam is one of the first national banks, which means that they are going to work sort of like a Federal Reserve works in the United States, where they maintain firm standards for international currency and help make Amsterdam the financial center of Europe. They're going to regulate the value of their money and their currency, and so then all of a sudden the Dutch coins are going to be the preferred coins for all of Europeans, because it's standardized, it's regulated, and as a result, being the center of all of the currency, they're also going to be the center of the economy. Now, the Dutch Republic is also going to be greatly influencing the art of the region as well as learning. If I was to ask you to name the great artists of the 17th and 18th centuries, you'll be able to name a Rembrandt, right, as you are looking at here. You'll maybe mention a Vermeer. But how many French artists can you just name off the top of your head? And there's a reason for that. The focus of the individual and individual success and is going to be greater in the Dutch Netherlands, and it changes the value of art and who has access to the art. In the Netherlands, art and culture and society become much more readily available than you would see in a absolute state such as France or Prussia. Here in this image, you're seeing Rembrandt's work, The Night Watch. Now, the Night Watch, it was not actually called The Night Watch. It is a name of the militia group. It was originally, the title of it was the name of this specific militia group that's present. And it actually is supposed to be taking on during the day, and that's why the light is so strong. It was renamed The Night Watch in the 18th century after it got darkened a bit. And people just sort of made certain assumptions without looking into it deeper. Maybe it was the 19th century when they rechanged the name. So the Night Watch. Who are these people, right? This is the Night Watch. This is a painting that is commemorating the people who run Amsterdam. So what you're seeing is a display, a celebration of civic participation in ordinary life. What this is it's a militia group, and they're fiercely proud of their militia groups. The militia groups were almost like clubs that men could join. You pay dues for them, you have a community there, you'd meet regularly, and you would also practice shooting and practice military formations so that in case of war, you would be able to defend your region, your province. And so what you're seeing here is a painting where you have two clear leaders and the rest of the group's in motion. There's much that we could discuss about this painting. It's an example of Baroque art with the movement and some of the angles, and also the light and dark, and sort of the emotional appeal. And yet it's also such a great example of Dutch art because it's celebrating individual common people. If you go down into France, the paintings are going to be dominated by nobles who want paintings of themselves or of the Sun King. The Dutch painters really reflecting what, in the same way the Renaissance art was reflecting what was important to the Renaissance Italy. The Dutch painters are really reflecting what is of value. And so we're seeing really middle-class life in the Netherlands. They don't do big battle scenes. You have to go to the southern Netherlands or Belgium for that, or into France to see the big classical battle scenes. Instead, you're going to see ordinary life. So this is a painter called Frans Hals, H-A-L-S. And once again, you're seeing a family scene. The middle class was well off enough to afford art for themselves in the northern regions like the Netherlands. So this was a painting that would have been commissioned by your middle class. It's sort of like a wealthy patron would have in the Renaissance Italy, but this is ordinary. This is a father of, I believe it's a cut-off painting, I think it was 10 children. So it's a huge family and supporting them. It's a painting that is sort of depicting the middle class people. And they're commissioning the painting themselves. And so they're painting the common consumer culture in the Netherlands. And the common consumer culture can even come across in the form of still lives. There are a series of paintings. You'll find that the Dutch were famous for creating these still lifes of, tulips, or of dinner table settings or breakfast, what they had for breakfast that day, with detailed examples and very realistic looks of just what people were eating. These very realistic still lifes of the food they eat, the stuff they have. It's a painting of possessions. This is a great painting. It's called The Geographer. And I'll use this to sort of jump off into the movement towards learning as well. But in this painting, you're seeing the geographer, you see all the objects. This painting was done by Vermeer. And you can see the consumer culture here, right? And also the connection, the worldliness of the Netherlands to the rest of the world. You have a globe in the background, a map. You have all these different objects present that are, depicting a certain message. The Netherlands was a place of toleration. During the Enlightenment, then, it's a place, a safe point for a sanctuary for thinkers. The works of the philosophers that could not be published in France are then going to be published in Switzerland and in the Netherlands. The Dutch are going to have the highest literacy rate in the world at this point. They have village schools and that children could then attend. In the Netherlands, science will flourish. We'll have Van Leeuwenhoek inventing the microscope, which will lead to modern biological sciences. The Dutch the Dutch had already invented the telescope, but we'll also see Christian Huygens is going to make the telescope even more precise, as well as invent things like the pendulum clock and discover the rings of Saturn and the wave theory of light. Our next unit we're moving into will be the scientific revolution. So these ideas and learning are going to help us sort of bridge the gap between this age as well as what's happening at the same time, the concurrent age of new thinking. And it's specialized here in the Dutch. So finally, let's just end with what happened to the Dutch. So why is there such a decline? The key to their strength and then the key to their weakness will be the economy. And the Dutch do face economic competition with England and France. England in 1651 will pass an English Navigation Acts. And these acts are going to require that all ships bringing goods in and out of England must be English ships. And as a result, the Dutch are going to be eliminated from this potential competition. The Dutch themselves are too small to be producers, so they had made all of their wealth on transporting goods to other countries. In addition, the Dutch are going to be fighting wars against English and French. The English and French even make a few secret alliances there. The Dutch in these wars are going to lose New Amsterdam, or New York City as you know it, and they'll also lose some of their foreign colonies. Once again, then the trade is really what they become dependent upon for their wealth. But they will not disappear, and one of the key reasons why they do not disappear is that they managed to make alliances, very smart alliances, with other nations of Europe. And so the story of the Dutch and their foreign policy is a great example of balance of power. When they make an alliance with the Habsburgs, the group that was their great enemy within 100 years prior, they make that alliance in order to counter Louis XIV's advances. And this is one way of an example of, always trying to maintain the balance of power. So that is the Dutch Republic. I hope that was fairly clear. It is an interesting example. If you're looking for a little bit more information, I recommend looking up Tulip Mania. Or watching something about the tulip boom. That is a great example of one of the first stock market bubbles and bursts, as the center of trade in the Dutch Netherlands was soon to learn. But that is our podcast for the day, and have a great afternoon.